The Think About Energy campaign, for those who are new to the discussion, is a campaign that we started about 6 years ago, where we would go to chambers of commerce, business and industry groups, labor groups, sit down with them and discuss why energy matters in our lives today. Not everyone sees a drilling rig in their backyard. They don't see pipelines being installed, but everybody benefits from this energy source. We call it downstream utilization. And so much of the Commonwealth is benefiting from this, whether they realize it or not. And today's focus is on manufacturing. And manufacturing is something that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in an aggregates business. We worked on a lot of different projects before moving here to Pennsylvania. But where I live in Pennsylvania, and the congressman knows this all too well because I live in his district, is blessed with manufacturing. Where Pennsylvania once was known for coal and steel, we are quickly turning the tide on that, and we're being known for other things: natural gas, energy, electricity, but also our natural gas can be used to create so many different products that we learned all too well during the COVID pandemic, that our supply chains became too taxed in certain instances, but those products were coming in from outside of this region, outside of this country. And what we want to take away from this conversation today is to question, why aren't we doing more to bring those opportunities here to the United States, especially to Pennsylvania? So with that being said, we encourage discussion. Please submit questions and answers. Any opportunities we have to interact with the folks, we'd be really happy to do that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Dan Meuser, who represents the 9th Congressional District. And I had to look this up because the congressional districts have changed over the last few years. And he represents parts of Luzerne County, but also Carbon, Columbia, Lebanon, Montour, Schuylkill, some of Berks, and some of Northumberland County. I had to write that down. But when I look at your district, Congressman, what I see there is manufacturing and warehouse and distribution. I would put that congressional district up against basically any other congressional district in the United States for its ability to produce products and move those products to the East Coast and up into New England. So I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. I'm really excited to have you on the program here today to share your thoughts on where we are as a country, manufacturing in general, maybe share some thoughts of your background in the manufacturing business, but then what we're doing at the federal level to bring those projects back to the United States, and most importantly, back to Pennsylvania. So without further ado, Congressman Meuser, I'd like to invite you to take the stage.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate everybody being here. I really thank Cabot very much, my old friend George Stark, Keith Smith, I appreciate you, Matthew Henderson. We spent some time working together. Of course, Bill, you and I have done our share of projects, and John Augustine as well, as so many on the call. I appreciate it. Yeah, Bill, the 9th Congressional has a number of labels to it. Some call it the beer capital of the world. I mean, a lot of us like that. We're the candy capital of the world. We're the Christmas tree capital of the world. We're also known as the distribution hub of North America. Some people just call it God's country. I like that one too. But we want to be, and we can be, the manufacturing hub to North America. And frankly, Pennsylvania can be the new Texas if we do things right. It's absolutely been an honor to serve as a member of Congress. As you outlined, there's many opportunities in the 9th Congressional every day. You look at them, pass by them, envision what can be from our cities to our rural areas. As stated, we are the distribution hub. We all know the data. 70% of the nation's, the continent's population is within a 10-hour drive. We've got low energy costs. We've got the people. We've got the economies of scale. We've got a lot of things going for us. Distributors can very often turn into much more. And I do know this from my past. You know, I spent 25 years in manufacturing in Northeast Pennsylvania. And I did serve for 4 years as revenue secretary. I set up many distribution centers around the country. And each one of them, over the years, transitioned from distribution to service, technical service, customer service, to light assembly, to light manufacturing, to all-out manufacturing. And I think that's a very reasonable transition that we need to continue to lean in on and hope to work to create opportunities for all of these very large companies that have established hubs in and taken advantage of our geographic proximity to the continent, to our populations, as well as just being a good place to do business. As Revenue Secretary, I worked with Dave Taylor and the Manufacturers Association and others, and we accomplished quite a few things along the way. And just to name one was the cracker plant, what was then the Royal Dutch Shell cracker plant. And we also were very engaged, as Matthew Henderson knows, as Revenue Secretary, we set up a natural gas, actually it's called Natural Gas and Oil Work Group, to assure that we guided the natural gas industry. It was developing, not necessarily in its infancy, we'll call it its adolescent days, from 11 to 15, to understand compliance and for us to know what they needed within reason, so as the industry could grow as seamlessly and responsibly as possible. We leaned in hard with Governor Corbett. He deserves a lot of credit, and a few other members. Governor did put me on his work group for that project. Myself, Alan Walker, and a few others, and we came through. We met with the Shell folks dozens of times, and we ended up winning as far as them not just deciding to build a cracker plant in the Northeast, which was never done before, but we beat out Ohio, who was offering them everything, and West Virginia along the way. So that was an example, and we were very inclusionary with all stakeholders, and look what we've got. We've got what will be a manufacturing renaissance out in the western part of the state, not just Beaver County. We had the opportunity for such a credit bill recently that the governor decided that he said the resources would be better utilized during the COVID epidemic, which was nonsensical because it was a performance-based tax credit, which was what we designed for the original cracker plant, and they take nothing unless they're building and utilizing natural gas and synthesizing it into ethylene. So, but we are here in Pennsylvania positioned to be the next Texas. We've got the schools, particularly the vocational schools, but we've got a great school system in our Ppe system, Penn State and others. We've got the energy. Lord knows we've got the energy. And as stated, we've got the people, we have the geographic locations. Now, over the last several years, the Trump administration, very frankly, has done a very good job allowing America to be competitive, far more competitive than it was before. Taxes, regulations, we know what was done. Taxes, regulations, energy independence policies, certainly trade, very important. Now, that makes our country competitive, and a rising tide definitely lifts all boats. I mean, Pennsylvania's numbers were terrific from an employment standpoint, wage increase standpoint, all sectors. Manufacturing increased by, I think it was at least 2,500 in new manufacturing jobs when it was on a serious decline for 8 years. So good things. But what we didn't do is we didn't move as far as where we stood on a competitive basis to other states. We're still 36, 37, 38, 39th, 41st as where a new business needs to be, somebody would like to start a new business. So that needs to change. Serving in Congress is really a good news, bad news story. I won't get into the bad news because we got limited time, but unfortunately there was a lot of opportunity lost with Speaker Pelosi leading the House down a road with bills to nowhere, and it was very political, including impeachment to nowhere and such. But I'm very, very enthused by the prospects of us getting through this recovery. We have an outstanding House leadership in our Republicans. people who I think the American people are going to be able to rely upon in Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise and others. The White House is amazing to work with. Even many Democrats say that. The president makes his secretaries available. I've met with in a year and a half, one-on-one, probably 12, 13 of the secretaries, usually more than once, from Perdue to Esper to Betsy DeVos to Steve Mnuchin, and it's been helpful. We've been able to affect change. The Vice President of the United States is incredible. You know, he's been up here several times. We know, makes himself available. And the president, crying out loud, I've been in the office for 18 months, and I've been with the president probably 7 or 8 times. I've had Democrats tell me when Obama was in office for 8 years, they met him once. There's also a guy by the name of Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro, I got to know very well. I got put on a congressional trade group when we were working on USMCA and the China trade deal. Peter is very well respected, even more so now in the White House. And he's got a goal, and his goal is bringing back manufacturing to America. And we want as much of it as possible here in Pennsylvania. Looking to create incentives from a government. The only thing you can force business to do is if, you know, our government's not in the business of forcing private industry to do anything, right? But we can create incentives. We can create the most competitive atmosphere possible. And that's what states are going to need to do if we're going to attract them here, rather than manufacturing coming back, going to Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arkansas, Indiana, Texas, of course, and Florida. So we got our work to do moving forward. But government purchasing, you know, the VA has requirements of what percentage of a product needs to, or service needs to be American made. All of government should actually have that. And we're gonna be moving in that direction to drive it that way. Certainly, low cost energy is a huge factor in that. Continued lowering of regulations, and the ultimate goal is not tariffs when it comes to trade, but 0% tariffs. Equal equivalency, equitable trade agreements, but preferably 0%. You think about that. You think we can do that? America's best days by far, particularly our manufacturing, are ahead of us. When we got the whole world, we got the best products, the best innovation, the best creativity, we got the best food. And the world could be our stage if we continue to open up these markets. But now we need to open up our economy, but we also have to appreciate that we need to do it by creating healthy and safe working environments. We can't be resistive to that, frankly. We cannot go backwards. We cannot shut down again. The governor's moves, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. We're not in the interests of livelihoods. You know, there's just a lot to be talked about there. Frankly, a lot of mistakes were made. But we do have to appreciate that we need to stay open. We need to protect those that are at high risk. And we need to do it in a safe manner. So these are some things from a federal and state level, and this group that we need to work on. And you know, we're going to make Pennsylvania great again, to borrow a phrase.
Well, Congressman, we appreciate your opening thoughts there, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions from our audience when we get to the Q&A section of this discussion there, but so much setting the stage, so much opportunity for this area. In fact, one of the reasons I was excited to take the helm of this Think About Energy briefing to discuss the manufacturing work, I spent a great deal of time at Cabot working with companies that are actually coming to Pennsylvania that want to locate here. And as you highlighted, there are issues, there are hurdles, there are reasons why other states, Texas, Ohio, West Virginia, are landing these companies, but there is interest here. So anything we can do, from hosting a Think About Energy briefing to working with these companies and working with some of the other organizations participating on this group, or even folks like yourself, Congressman, I think Pennsylvania is setting itself up for a new opportunity, a new day, and we're very much looking forward to that. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our next guest, our next speaker. He's representing the National Association of Manufacturers. He is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Mobilization, Keith Smith. And we were joking before we started here to get that title right, so I had to sneak a peek there. But Keith, thank you for joining us. And we very much look forward to hearing what the National Association of Manufacturers is doing to transition through this quarantine, this COVID shutdown, and get America back on track and hopefully attract some new manufacturing base here to this country. Keith?
Thanks, Bill. And from the very beginning of the pandemic, manufacturers have really been leading the country through the COVID-19 response. And the rest of the country is depending on our industry to be leading the recovery and the renewal that we hope to achieve. So manufacturers, as most on this call know, we've been on the front lines, ramping up production of personal protective equipment for the first responders and medical professionals, racing towards vaccines and cures, and producing food and supplies needed to keep shelves stocked. It's been one of the largest industrial mobilizations since World War II. And so the National Association of Manufacturers, we represent 14,000 manufacturers of all sizes and sectors across the country. Our work over the last 13, 14, 15 weeks has really fallen into about 4 distinct buckets. First, it was getting the guidance that our members needed from the CDC and other agencies, and to be able to share best practices so that manufacturers knew what was needed to keep operations going and to keep their workforce safe. Second, making sure state and local governments didn't shut down essential manufacturing operations because of vaguely worded orders. From the onset, we understood the ability of manufacturers of all sizes to be able to ramp up and convert their production to fill the needs for essential supplies, or be part of that supply chain that was needed for that production. We forcefully made the case that all manufacturing was essential because we knew what was possible and manufacturers could step up to the call and respond to the call. The approach that Governor Wolf took in Pennsylvania, unlike a lot of other states, created a tremendous amount of uncertainty and a lot of disruption for manufacturing operations. However, through the work of our field advocacy team, including Todd Shelton, Tim Gould, and our strong state partner, the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, we were able to provide assistance in helping manufacturers in Pennsylvania and their supply chains receive the necessary waivers they needed to stay open. Now, as we approach and enter into this recovery phase, we're focused on ensuring the environment that gives manufacturers a level of certainty and confidence that they need to be able to restore their operations fully. We were also instrumental in getting the government of Mexico to start backing off their attempts to shut down manufacturing in their country, which is dangerous for the North American supply chain that was really reinforced with the recent passage of the USMCA agreement. We appreciate the Congressman's strong support for that deal, making the case all over the Commonwealth, the important impact that deal has for manufacturing workers. Third, we were focused on mobilizing production of PPE. That's now an acronym that more Americans are familiar with, but is not an unfamiliar acronym for manufacturers. We connected manufacturers that had PPE or could produce PPE with officials at FEMA, the White House, and other agencies, as well as the Wolf administration through the Department of Community and Economic Development, so that they could get that material to where it needed to go most. Many of the manufacturers who did receive waivers did so because of their capacity to manufacture PPE. This not only allowed for more production of it, but kept Pennsylvania workers employed who otherwise would have been likely laid off. And the final area of focus has been getting the right policies enacted through Congress and the administration. But manufacturers were facing pretty major headwinds right now. 3 weeks ago, the NAM released our Manufacturers Outlook Survey for the second quarter of 2020. Something that we've been doing since the mid-90s. And it showed, despite a historic drop in optimism, which went down to nearly 34% of all manufacturers being optimistic, that was the lowest since the first quarter of 2009, and those challenging business conditions. But the bright spot has been the vast majority of manufacturers, 98.7%, were able to continue or only just temporarily halt their operations since the start of the pandemic. The survey also shows that manufacturers are innovating to find the solutions needed to keep businesses running and protect workers and communities. With almost 22% of manufacturers retooling to produce PPE, 67% re-engineering their processes to reflect COVID-19 safety protocols, and about 12% completely reevaluating the mission of their firms. We're seeing a true renewal in manufacturing that was spurred on by this pandemic. But when we think of the path ahead, we're looking at it in 3 phases: response or recovery, and that renewal I mentioned. Response has been what we've been all living through over the last few weeks, the recovery which we've begun, but there's more tools that we need to be truly effective in our recovery. And finally, a renewal that we hope to achieve, which will be a longer term endeavor, so that we can come out of this stronger than we were. Policymakers and regulators debate solutions to help the economy recover. The NAM's been urging them to focus on that renewal agenda that we laid out in what we call the American Renewal Action Plan. This plan provides lawmakers with a roadmap on essential policies that help manufacturers respond to the crisis as quickly as possible, help with the recovery, and ultimately lead to renewal. We've been encouraged by the actions taken so far, but there's still a strong need for tax provisions to ensure investment in manufacturing, measures to reaffirm that the supply chain here in the country can protect the businesses that continue to operate on the front lines of the pandemic, and to have targeted liability reforms to protect essential employers. And that is really key to reopening the economy fully. We've seen states like Iowa that have enacted smart safe harbors, and we encourage other states and our members of Congress, and both in the House and the Senate, to be able to enact legislation which will protect those that have done the right thing in face of uncertain dangers associated with COVID-19. Too many employers right now are facing the specter of liability lawsuits that are spurred on by the trial bar and looking to profit from a period of economic distress. As of this morning, I believe we had just over 2,800 complaints filed in the courts overall. And that's why the NAM and our network of state partners, including PMA in Harrisburg, we've been leading the campaign for targeted and common sense federal and state level liability protections for essential businesses. But another big part of our American Renewal Action Plan has been on onshoring and strengthening the supply chain right here in America. Now, the reason is simple. It's clear that the Trump administration is intent on really highlighting the pandemic as a reason to bring more production back into the United States. And that's likely what potential Biden administration would want to do as well. Manufacturers are critical to lifting our economy out of the current recession, as they've been creating the protective equipment and essential products needed to continue to fight the spread of the virus. And that's why we're strongly supported policies that would strengthen the supply chain and encourage critical investment right here in the United States. The job of the NAM is to make sure that it's done in a way based on incentives rather than certain punitive approaches that have been suggested. We can't disrupt our global supply chains that provide manufacturers in the United States the vital components and products that we can't find anywhere else and could potentially disrupt our recovery efforts. So we've launched a nationwide campaign to be able to highlight that message. And we've made it available, Bill, by being able to text RENEW to 52886. And by texting RENEW to 52886, you can see specific details on our onshoring proposals, see some of the campaign-related materials that we've been able to employ across the country. So appreciate the opportunity to join everyone here today, and I'm looking forward to the questions that I know we're going to get to soon.
Keith, thank you so much. And while we were chatting, or while you were chatting, I actually took the opportunity to text it in. It took 30 seconds to do it. So I encourage everyone watching today, we'll remind everyone, text RENEW to 52886. It's simple, easy to get connected, and it will help ultimately achieve our goals. It's now my pleasure to introduce John Augustine, CEO and President of Penn's Northeast. And when we were putting together today's panel, we wanted to balance the federal legislative issues, the national issues, but then also a regional perspective. John Augustine and I have worked together for many years, actually on the ground here, trying to locate businesses in the Northeast PA. And we think it's an important component of our discussions as, again, Pennsylvania as a whole and Northeast PA go to bat against other regions of the country to say, this is why you want to build here. This is why you want to invest here. And John, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the stage here and have share your thoughts about the successes of Penn's Northeast and all of the great stuff you're working on.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you all for putting this together. Keith, pleasure to be with you on the phone, and I've known the congressman for a very long time, being from Northeastern PA, and it's nice to have somebody who's walked the walk and talked the talk. Coming from a manufacturing background, to where he is today. He knows the struggles of small businesses. Frankly, I'm also excited to be on this call with, seeing the guest list with former colleagues, coworkers, friends, including my former boss, Katie Klaber. I saw her on the list, and was fortunate to be the outreach coordinator for the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Previously, it was with the Wilkes-Barre Chamber, so got to see really kind of all facets of small business. And when you look at northeastern Pennsylvania, we fueled the Industrial Revolution. When we started with coal and then moved that across to Pittsburgh and Allentown to do the steel and the iron, our history is better than any other state. And frankly, when we talk about manufacturing, business in general, it's a competition. It's a global competition. And we need to make sure on the federal, local, state, regional levels that we're frankly putting our best foot forward, knowing other states are doing the same thing. So at Penn's Northeast, we oversee 8 counties. We're fortunate enough to have every county in the upper right quadrants of the state as a member of our organization. That includes local governments, county governments, but it also includes private businesses, construction companies, manufacturers, and we act as an umbrella organization to go out on a national and frankly global level to attract business here. The pandemic was certainly difficult for the United States as a whole. I think it was very difficult for Pennsylvania. Hopefully we learned some lessons. Our trends prior to that were different. So for example, we are very fortunate, as the Congressman mentioned, to be within 3/4 of the US population within that 1 day's drive that a trucker can do. And I found out that we're also within half the Canadian population. Canada's 2 things, it's left and it's right, and just moose in the middle. So, we can reach Canada, we can reach the majority of the US, and that's what makes Pennsylvania why we're the Keystone State. So whether you're on the western part or the eastern part, you kind of have to go through Pennsylvania. From kind of where we were trending was we obviously had an explosion in e-commerce and distribution. It started out with big boxes, 1 million square feet based on our location. As the Congressman mentioned, we started to see that change and move to some higher skills, more robotics, more technology, and frankly, better wages. So just in the greater Wilkes-Barre area, the average starting salary 2 years ago was $9 an hour. Well, it's $15.75 with benefits. That's with no government influence. I don't know anybody that's making minimum wage, I gotta be honest with you, because some of these are low-skilled jobs and some of them are very high-skilled jobs. But $15.75 is not a bad place to start. We can always get better and we can always grow, and that's what competition does. We don't need government to step in to do that. What we've started to see, the only problem with e-commerce and warehousing is typically they don't use a ton of natural resources, right? It's conveyor belts, it's not heavy on the manufacturing side. And so I think that gives us that leg up. As I talked about competition, there's no other state, with the exception of Texas, that can be as competitive as Pennsylvania. Why in God's name would you want to be in New York and pay the cost, whether it's on an office side, whether it's on a manufacturing side? And I really think there's a great opportunity to attract businesses. Bill, you and I, we're working on, it's not Shell, but it's going to hopefully be one of the next best things to Shell. It's an amazing project. But we have challenges. The failure of House Bill 1100 was very disappointing. When we look to our neighbors to the west and the south that are putting incentives on the board for companies, incentives are a double-edged sword, and you can't do, frankly, one-offs. You have to put them on the table just so you can be a player in the game. Companies hire brokers that look for lots of things, and incentives are one of them. Typically, it has always been location, location, location. So we're in a good spot for that. And in the last 2 years, location took a backseat to labor, and it was, do you have the market? Well, we have great trade schools. We have 19 colleges and universities here in northeastern Pennsylvania that graduate over 40,000 students every year. Outside of places like Philly or Pittsburgh, there's nowhere else in the state that does that. We're an affordable place to operate. We have reliable energy, and that, frankly, is not just gas. We have our water companies, Pennsylvania American Water, investing in their infrastructure, PPL, who constantly goes above and beyond. And I would challenge anyone to find a state better than PA when it comes to those assets, which is why we need to get past those challenges. Because in theory, they should be easy to fix, right? And looking at putting those incentives out there. So while it was location, now it's labor, location second. The newest one that our site selector friends are talking about is, how did your community, how did your state fare during this pandemic, during this crisis? And I gotta be honest with you, we didn't do so good. Other states were worse, but a lot of states were better. There was a lot of disruption, who's open, who's closed, why, what's the reasoning, and small businesses are the lifeblood of America. And when Keith talks about, for example, PPE, it's what most of those people that manufacturers that made those PPE never even knew the word PPE themselves, but they were able to quickly convert, reintegrate, reinvent, and come up with those products without a long line of trying to do so. And that's what makes America great, that when we're faced with a challenge, we're able to quickly overcome that, and that's what we did. We know there's going to be future pandemics, whether it comes in the fall or whether, frankly, it comes next year with something else. If we don't reinvent quickly, if we don't onshore quickly, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves, because we have every tool and resource at our disposal to do it. And again, Pennsylvania has more than others. We got hardworking people, whether you're blue collar or white collar, whether you're a trade. We have all those assets that a company will look for. And what the companies are telling us is, what happens when round two comes or a new round? Am I still going to be open for business? Am I still going to be able to operate? Are you going to help me with those resources? And we want to say overwhelmingly, yes. Our unemployment in northeastern Pennsylvania has traditionally been higher than the state and national average. But prior to this, we were down with our lowest unemployment numbers ever. And I really think after this virus, we have the ability to be a lot stronger, and that comes with manufacturing. If you think that it's a good idea where 76% of medicine is made outside of your country, that's a bad idea. When the majority of your products that you need, tariffs or not, that's a bad idea. And I would rather, frankly, pay a little bit more and have that product here and have my neighbors working than be relying on others. And even before this, we started to see some positive trends. We worked very well with the state through the Governor's Action Team, the Department of Community and Economic Development, and interestingly enough, the Office of International Business Development. And for those folks that don't know, there is approximately 14 reps throughout the world that are stationed in spots to try to bring business to northeastern Pennsylvania. So where my office is in Pittston, right across the street, is a company that came from Europe. They employ 300 people. They just attracted one of their suppliers, bringing another 150. We've had food companies looking at our area. We're a hotspot for food. That's not something that you really want to outsource. Sometimes things tend to spoil. So, making that here. We've always been strong on plastics, metal fabrication. And I think the other opportunity with this virus has been the remote working, that, again, you're paying $200,000 for a small box in Manhattan. You could be having a beautiful home in northeastern Pennsylvania for 2,000 square feet and be able to do that. So again, I think from our standpoint with our partners, that the opportunity is right. I think, again, we have a lot of those tools and resources when a company starts to look at what are my costs if I'm here versus somewhere else, and we can start checking those boxes, having a strong voice on the federal sid with our congressional and Senate leaders, with the president, who gets it, with good state representation, and making sure we take advantage of this situation, because these are once in a lifetime opportunities. This was a, a lemon versus a lemonade type scenario. What we need to do is come out of this much stronger. We need to do it now. We have the opportunity to do so. So, I want to thank you folks and everybody out there that is doing their best on a daily basis to make this better, because, frankly, it's now or never. And so, we're willing to help, and we have partners all across the state. Obviously, we want business in our backyard first, but I also want it in Pennsylvania before I want it in another state. And so, we have great partnerships with the IRCs and the EDOs and the chambers, and now's the time. And so, I think we're poised and, ready to go. And the fact that we can have affordable, reliable, and responsible natural gas puts us way up on that list for manufacturing.
Well, thank you very much there, John. And I do appreciate your insights. I don't think people realize the amount of effort that has gone into moving earth in this district, in this region, to prep sites, to be able to transition from that coal/steel mentality to the new age of manufacturing. And we're on the cusp of it. And our proximity to market just makes it so exciting. I want to remind everybody, please submit questions. We have about 20 minutes of Q&A here. If we don't get to questions today, we will follow up with our guests and we will get answers from them, maybe even do a follow-up video. So please don't hesitate to do that. I also do want to shout out to a group that we've worked with, John and myself, quite a bit, and that's labor. You touched on it, John. The labor guys are great to work with. And this sets up my first question to Congressman Meuser and Keith. A lot of talk about an infrastructure bill. A lot of talk about how this country is in need of an infrastructure overhaul, some stuff that just needs to be updated. And I'm curious to see, both at a national level, but also at a state level, what you're hearing on an infrastructure bill and when we think we might see such an infrastructure bill. Because I know a lot of labor guys are ready to get to work, and a lot of manufacturers would love to see some new highways, bridges, pipelines being built. Congressman, I'll throw it to you first.
Well, there's talk of so-called phase 4. We'll certainly be working on that. That does likely will come about. I hope it does in the month of July. Liability insurance is very important. We do need to help. President had that Project Warp Speed for finding a vaccine, very important. The PPP, New Flexibility Act, was passed. That needed to be done. There were far too many, particularly in Pennsylvania, and restaurants and the tourist industry. That 8-week period didn't work for them, so we extended out that to 24 weeks. We got to open up the schools. That's part of the list. And I've also got a coal reclamation bill that I think would be very important as far as phase 4 goes for Pennsylvania and other states. But T&I is at the top of the list. Transportation infrastructure. I just Monday introduced a bill which is establishing something called the Infrastructure Bank of America. That's the private sector capitalized, fully privately owned and managed approach that, not to get into the details, but could add as much as $300, $400, $500 billion a year in private skin in the game as far as for development of infrastructure and basically public-private partnerships, primarily revenue generating such projects. But I am all for whether that ends up being part of a transportation infrastructure bill or a standalone. It's absolutely essential. We all know our roads. We've got our share. In Pennsylvania, we have more state roads than all of New York and New England combined. We've depleted our motor license fund because people weren't driving for a couple of months, and that comes from gasoline taxes. So it's essential. I'm a big proponent of it. So now we've been a big proponent of it for a while now. So let's hope that, so is the president. I mean, the president wants this to happen. Let's hope it can in the next 4 months, 5 months prior to the election. I feel as if I feel assured that it will occur next year if it doesn't occur now, because it's essential for our modernization, and there's really a number of smart ways of going about it that are being introduced. There's a bill coming to the out of committee soon that is another bill going nowhere, unfortunately, that the Democrat leadership is bringing. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean to sound so political, but you know, I'm about results. I got many friends on both sides of the aisle, but when something is possible, I get a lot more excited about it than just a messaging bill, which this one will be another of such. So yeah, we've got to get it done. It's talked about in every caucus meeting we have, every conference call that we have, from leadership through the rank and file. We want to get something done.
Yeah, I would just add, Bill, you know, before the pandemic, the need to make bold investments in our nation's infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but our energy infrastructure, has been one of those unique opportunities where we've been able to see the business community and the labor community really come together to approach this in a very nonpartisan way. And strengthening our nation's infrastructure should be something that should be done in a bipartisan way. You know, pre-pandemic, we saw the need, but, you know, looking at where many of the state and local budget shortfalls are, it'll be critically important for the congressman and others to be able to get that surface transportation reauthorization done before, I believe it comes up at the end of September. So that's something that we're optimistic for, but beyond that, you know, looking for, continuing to work closely with the labor community to have bold action, not just in investments, but continued progress on permitting reform that can enable and avoid some of the restrictions that we've seen for the critical energy infrastructure that I know that's been so vital to Western Pennsylvania and throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Keith. A couple of questions that have come in focus on the same topics. How can organizations like Penn's Northeast and the National Association of Manufacturers work with small and mid-sized companies to get into the supply chain of key industries, whether that be military or healthcare or the energy sector? So Keith, we're up on you right now. Why don't you take that, and then we'll jump to John. But what is the National Association of Manufacturers doing or have in place to help small and mid-sized businesses?
Yeah, the durability and flexibility of manufacturers this year was really put in center stage, and how manufacturers can adapt their production lines and how they can adjust to be able to incorporate and integrate within various larger manufacturer supply chains. Not too long ago, we developed a networking forum called the Manufacturers Marketplace. You can go to it at manufacturersmarketplace.us. We did something different just a few weeks ago, where we created a free portal for companies to be able to go in, seek out needs that they have in the form of PPE, not just masks, but gloves, goggles, face shields, making that free and accessible to be able to connect them with suppliers that can be able to meet those needs. That's something that we hope will create greater interest in that marketplace that can help connect small and mid-sized manufacturers, be able to highlight what their capabilities are, and to be able to find partners throughout the supply chain that they can connect into better. And I think that's something that we've seen throughout the pandemic is, you know, a greater interest of larger companies to be able to make sure that there's a resiliency built into their supply chain, and having a bit of diversity among their current supply chain, so that come a pandemic or other major economic disruptions, they're able to continue operations and do so with a sense of reliability and certainty. So that's one tool that I would recommend, Bill, that can help in that regard.
Great, thanks, Keith. John?
Matt keeps muting me. I guess he doesn't want me to talk. So, but you know, from our standpoint, we're very fortunate to have great partners, not just across the strait, but locally. And so we work very well with our IRC, which is NEPERC, and also with NEPA Alliance and Ben Franklin and our manufacturing association. And so some of the things that we do is we host annually. That delegation that I mentioned that are throughout the world, working for the state DCD, we host them here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, and we tour them to local businesses. Like the Congressman mentioned, we make sure that, we hit Yangling every year, and then we hit places like Pride and others. We also partner with them to have manufacturing days where they can pitch their products to those supply chains that you're talking about. And so a lot of times, when you're running a small business, that's a lot of work, right? You're trying to make your product, you're trying to manage your product, you're trying to market your product, and you really need those resources to be able to help with that, with those other things. And between our network with the chambers and those groups that I mentioned, that help is there. And so what I would encourage, and frankly, I believe that help is all across Pennsylvania. There's a great network for that. So anybody who's on this call who is struggling from a supply chain standpoint, what Penn's Northeast has tried to do is become a one-stop shop for business, no matter what the business, whether you're small, large, manufacturer, distributor, and they're often, with any government, there's a lot of hoops to have to jump through. And so we try to make that easy and be that easy button. So call me, call our staff, and we'll get you the answers. And if we don't have them, we'll follow up and we'll point in that right direction. Because one of the things that's always been frustrating in Pennsylvania is that we talk about more taxes, more taxes, more taxes, whether it's on the gas industry or anything else. That's not how you grow an economy. You grow an economy by growing businesses that pay taxes. So you don't tax an industry, you tax multiple businesses that all share together those things that we would like to enjoy, like no potholes, like safe bridges. And so I think it's really important. And that's, I think, was kind of frustrating with House Bill 1100 was this is something that passed overwhelmingly with Republicans and Democrats. Congressman, how often does that happen? Complete bipartisan support, trades, unions, and the associations that got behind this, it's a no-brainer. I can't create those tools to offer a company. Shell would not be here, in my opinion, without those incentives, or it would have been really difficult with those incentives. And when you have Ohio rolling out 25 red carpets, it's hard to compete with that. And so if everybody does their part, we will have an amazing tax base, and we will be able to help those small businesses. So to answer your question, though, if any are struggling with the supply chain, give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll be happy to point them in the right direction.
Great, thanks, John. We have a few more questions here before we reach the end of our time here. Congressman, I'd like to throw one over to you. I know you serve on the House Committee of Education and Labor. Up in our district, Susquehanna County, just north of you, next week, the Susquehanna County Career and Technology Center is going to be opening a CDL school. CDL schools are very important, in my opinion, because even before the pandemic hit, we didn't have enough drivers to move the products we were moving. And today, we still don't have enough drivers to move the products that we're moving. So when manufacturing does come back, we're going to need a lot more drivers. But more so to the career and technical side of things, what's being done at, say, the federal level to invest in career and technology centers, whether they be a CDL school or just welding, advanced manufacturing. These are great schools, and we need to transition, especially our youth and young adults, into those types of careers.
Have the funding. Barriers were knocked down related to Pell Grants, and GI Bill and all school funding for traditional schools has been more or less completely made available for the vocational schools as well. I have a number of vocational schools throughout my district, and they're all terrific. I've visited every one. And I'll tell you what, you got young people in there that have a bounce in their step, that are doing something, that are doing carpentry or doing plumbing or doing welding, and they're going to come out and they know there's going to be jobs available for them. We need to continue to advance that. Funding is for the school and for the tuition are not necessarily the issues, as the administrators tell me. What is an issue is money for the capital equipment. They can't learn, they can't train unless they've got the right equipment to be training on. So what I try to do is, I'm hoping everyone on this call can appreciate connecting businesses with them, because it would be beneficial, of course, to a business if they were able to invest perhaps in whatever that apparatus or device would be that they could train on, and then they'd be developing some future skilled workers. So more of that would be helpful, but it's regular conversation. We also need to remove the stigma. I'm very happy that many high schools now have career development. Some have great career development, some not so much. So they need to appreciate that. Again, there's a certain type of student that, boy, they really get inspired by engaged in that level of work. And there's tremendous opportunities there. And, so many future entrepreneurs come from that, right? They come out, they're a plumber, whatever they might be, and then they start, or electrician, they start their business, they get good at it, they hire a few people. Next thing you know, they've got 25 employees. So big advocate for it. It's one of the best things about being on education labor, be helpful in that regard.
Thank you, Congressman. Keith, I'll give you the final opportunity to respond to this question with your final thoughts. We're up against our deadline here too.
Yeah, I would say, again, the issue of what we call the skills gap crisis was one of the biggest issues facing manufacturing employers of all sectors before the pandemic, and it still continues. Half of manufacturers, even today, in light of the economic recovery challenges that we're facing, still are facing challenges of attracting the skilled talent that they need to fill jobs that currently exist. We were able to partner with Deloitte to be able to model out, between now and 2028, we see the potential, unless really significant action is taken, the potential for 2.4 million manufacturing jobs going unfilled. Is part of our onshoring initiative. Some of the recommendations that we've been able to highlight is to be able to increase the amount of educational credits that can be applied for an employee's gross income. Right now, the IRS code allows for, I believe, $5,200 for deductibility. We recommended doubling that, and to be able to look at some of the very creative and innovative earn and learn models, to be able to have a greater ability to defray some of the costs that employers face with those programs, to be able to look at some creative new deductions in that regard. But the biggest area of focus is the perception of the opportunities that exist. And that's something that the NAM is launched, our Creators Wanted initiative, to be able to reach out to that next generation of the manufacturing workforce, not just students, but the parents and teachers that are vital in shaping those career decisions, to get them attracted to understand what's possible and speak to them in terms that next and future generation can relate to get them excited. The days of dirty, dark, and dangerous manufacturing are over. When students have the ability to go into a manufacturing facility and see what's possible and what's needed for not just today, but tomorrow's modern manufacturing economy, that's one of the biggest areas of focus that span a partisan divide and require not just leadership from policymakers, but really responsibility that manufacturers have to take on to commit themselves, to highlight themselves and what the career potentials are out there for that next generation.
Keith, thank you so much. I just got 3 text messages from John Augustine. He wants to comment. He gets 1 minute and then we're done. John.
It will be less, and it was 7 text messages, but hey, I just want to mention, and Cabot knows this all too well with building the petroleum and natural gas school at Lackawanna. It's a lot of times not just going out to the kids, but it's going out to the parents so that they see the stigma's been removed, the cost benefit versus the expenses there. And I'll just kind of leave it with this. Those jobs that we're talking about, whether it's plumbing, heating, CDL, manufacturing, they can't be outsourced. You have a job for life in one of those very good paying jobs. So I would encourage, everybody, whether it's students, children, grandchildren, to at least look at all of those options about what this country is offering us to be better.
Thank you very much, John. Well, with that, I'd like to thank again Congressman Meuser, Keith Smith, and John Augustine for joining us today. I think we had a lot of great conversation, a lot of opportunity to go forth and attract manufacturing to the U.S. and especially here in Pennsylvania in the Northeast.